Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur, CBB aficionado. We're out here, we're doing it, we're winding down the season. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that we are here, Final Four weekend. It's always a bittersweet moment. You know, I love the grind when November comes and we're doing our thing. And then, you know, the dog days of summer for MLB, that grind, right? Like, we got the dog days of winter for us, January into February, and we're questioning life. And then we get into March and we're re-energized and we hit all these, you know, big shots and big spots and profit and all this good stuff. And before you know it, we're neck deep into the tournament, and just wake up one morning and it's Final Four weekend. So here we are at the end. We have just two slates left. The Final Four 2-game slate, then the championship on Monday. Just watched some women's basketball, which, you know, has been great. The tournament has been phenomenal. They're getting really good ratings. And I've been saying for years, as somebody who grinds WNBA, DFS, and bets on it, like, women's basketball is getting up there, guys. Like, it's legitimately fun to watch. And the influx of talent, and I mean, we're just evolving, right? Watching the women's Final Four, two thoughts there. South Carolina is just a Terminator. I'm not going to lie and sit here and say, like, I watched every single women's game like I do the men's game or anything, but I'm aware. I know certain players, and I do watch, you know, games from here to there. We had the Cardosa PRA call from the other night. Jesus, she had like 22 and 11. What a monster! But that South Carolina team, like, they just absolutely squished NC State. Fun story there on the women's side, just like the men making the run, but just, you know, completely overmatched. And then that Iowa-UConn game, which just ended. Of course, you know, if you don't live in a hole somewhere, you probably watched it, or at least you see on socials the outcry there. UConn with a legitimate chance to win, you know, gets called for a moving screen. You rarely see, even if it was, like, I don't know what your guys' take is there. I'll give you my take real quick, even if you didn't ask for it. A moving screen with like less than 30 seconds is a hell of a call. Whether it's right or wrong, some people are the opinion like, hey, if it's a moving screen, I don't care if there's 1 second left. I don't care if there's 30 minutes left. Like, you call, a call is a call is a call, and you call. Some people believe that you let the players decide when it's at a certain time, you know, with the game on the line, you let it play out, unless it's brutally obvious, like somebody comes and like cross checks, you know, somebody in the face, or, you know, it's a really obvious charge. Like, yeah, you got to call that stuff, but was it a moving screen? Probably. Did the Iowa players sell the hell out of it? Definitely. That's just a really rough one. And it would have been better to let it play out and see what happens. I mean, no guarantee UConn even does anything with it, but at least the players would have decided. Not the best game for Paige Buckets. Not even the best game for Caitlin Clark, but Iowa does advance back in the title game. They're facing off against South Carolina, another SEC team. They lost to LSU last year, of course, defeated them this year, the quote-unquote Caitlin Clark Redemption Tour, and now they're going up against an absolute just like juggernaut of a team in South Carolina. And I don't know. I didn't follow the women's game as much as I do the men's game, but from watching, I've watched 3 South Carolina tournament games. And I, you know, again, not going to lie, I've seen parts of like 4 others because I have ESPN Plus, and I do watch a lot of games on demand. And I have ventured into the realm of women's basketball there because I like the WNBA, and I do play it a lot. That South Carolina team reminds me a lot of UConn in the way that they're just dispatching of opponents. And it's crazy how the two are mirroring each other in a way that, wow, NC State made it to the Final Four. That was great. But they were overmatched, right? And that South Carolina team is just, they're the juice. No other way to say it. UConn, they're gas. No other way to say it. So I think South Carolina ultimately is going to end up the national champions there. There'll be some betting opportunities perhaps, but Caitlin Clark's last game before she goes into the WNBA, that should be interesting. But a good little like, to get our juices flowing, right, for the Final Four tomorrow. We just finished up the NIT. Shout out to, Shaheen Holloway, who is an amazing coach with little to no NIL compared to other programs. Loses a ton of players from the prior year, gets Dre Davis and Kadari Richmond back, and they, kind of grind their way through some ups and downs of a season, but a 25-win season. And they needed overtime at home to beat St. Joe's in that first round of the NIT game. And that could have gone either way, right? Like, they could have not gutted that one out, lost, and then everybody just, whatever, forgets about it. Seton Hall, an underperforming season, kind of what was expected. But they win that game in overtime, and then they proceed to just cruise. They just wall up North Texas, UNLV, Georgia, smack, smack, smack. Was that old meme from like a decade ago? Smash, smash, smash. And then the Indiana State game, like, damn, down 9 with a minute and a half, and you win the game. Like, geez, as far as lifetime contracts go, I thought Calipari getting one at Kentucky was a bad idea. I generally think lifetime contracts are a bad idea. But in this instance, I think Seton Hall should be giving everything to Shaheen Holloway. Lifetime contract. Here you go. You are never to leave this program, and we're going to go out and find money any way we can. Even if that means we're picking up pennies off the corner, we are going to get some NIL money for you. Who wouldn't want to play for Shaheen Holloway, man? It's going to be interesting to see what they do. Like Dre Davis, Alamir Dawes, Kadari Richmond, Jaden Bediako, Dylan Adewusu, all of those guys, seniors. I think maybe Dylan Adewusu has a year that he can use. I think Bediako is out of eligibility. So we'll see how that shakes out. But a completely new roster, basically. They'll have to hit the portal. They didn't do too well in the portal with losses last year, but they've completely fought their way to an NIT title. And they beat a very good Indiana State team. And Indiana State, no shame there. Both of those teams obviously proved that they belonged in the NCAA tournament. Certainly more so than Virginia, and honestly probably more so than Colorado State or Colorado. Those are just the facts. That's the reality. Congratulations to Josh Schertz, the Indiana State coach. He was, very good for Indiana State, takes them super far, but now he takes the St. Louis job. A lot of people were asking, like, is that even a better job? Why would he do that? Well, it might not seem like a better job because Indiana State's played better, but it's more money, obviously, for him, more NIL, better facilities, clearly, and more exposure, and in a conference that can be, not necessarily always is, but can be a multi-bid conference, whereas the MVC, not going to happen. As you see, they just, losing to Drake, they didn't get in. They belonged in, but they didn't. A little more margin for error there. Billikens and the St. Louis area is a talent-rich area, so Josh Schertz is going to do great there. And you got to figure he's probably going to get, like, Robbie Avila. He's a sophomore. He's not going to the NBA, so you got to figure Robbie might, take a gander there and see what's up in St. Louis. He's from the Illinois area, Oak Forest. I'm not too sure where in Illinois that is, but we'll see if maybe the Illini try to entice him. But I would expect him to hit the portal. Ryan Conwell's only a sophomore. Isaiah Swope's a junior. Julian Larry's an underclassman. Jason Kent is a junior. Like, we could theoretically see this Sycamores team just go with him to St. Louis. And if that's the case, watch out, A10, because St. Louis is legit. Anyways, that's out of the way. We saw how crazy the showdown could be Jason Kent had a pretty mediocre game. Avila had a bad game. Kadari Richmond went nuts. Trey Davis had a solid game, but we saw Ryan Conwell shoot horribly, and there were guys that people weren't looking at or maybe didn't have the best overall NIT tournaments in Julian Larry and Isaiah Swope, who both ended up on the optimal. So you can see there's a lot of craziness that happens, some variance with those showdown slates. We'll get more into that and breaking down further and some of the combos and different ways we can go on Sunday night during the Natty Championship show of the CBB Super Show, which again will be taking place on Sunday night. Here we're going to talk about the 2-game slate. This is the final classic slate of the season. Pour one out if you got them. Speaking of which, anyone who is new to the show, welcome. I appreciate it. You veterans of the program that continue to support me, thank you once again. Everybody join hands and drop a like on the video. I never expected myself to beg for likes, and when I watch videos, I always think, that's lame. Why would you do that? Well, let me tell you, the best way you can help me, FTN, and the Super Show itself, been following it since Blog Talk Radio a decade ago, you understand how much blood, tears, sweat, and all of that good stuff have gone into getting us where we are here now. Impressions and the YouTube algorithm, all of that stuff is helped by you, the viewer, not only clicking on the video to watch it, but dropping that like, sharing it, commenting, questions, concerns, anything at all, even when it's on demand. Your guys' continued support has kept us going. We just dropped a few YouTube shorts earlier regarding Zach Edey and some of the NC State guys, so check those out on the FTN Shorts channel. But yeah, we have a lot of cool stuff going on. I'm very excited, very fortunate to be here, and honestly, you guys have been the main reason for that. Doing Blog Talk Radio show a long time ago with my man Rob, we were doing shows for like 2 people. We're passionate. We love it. And honestly, even if one of you was watching right now, I'd still be doing this because I love talking about college basketball. And I just overall, this is what I want to do. And I have a lot of fun doing it. And you guys have helped us build a great community. Whether you sub to FTN or not, you're in the community if you watch this show. And I really do truly appreciate that. All right. Sappy stuff aside, let's get into this slate. Let's break it down. We're in the Final Four. We've got opportunities. We want to bet, some props. We're going to bet on some of these game lines. We're going to check out the great Mike Kutry and what his prop bet's going to be. Mike Randall, Chief Content Officer and amazing at everything that he does. We'll see what he's talking about. He's got his betting show in the morning, bright and early. So when you wake up after, watching this one, especially if you're not able to watch live and you're watching it on demand, make sure you flip over and check out Randall's betting show. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to make money here all weekend long. It's the Final Four. One shining moment is upon us. All right, so the first game on the slate we're going to talk about here, there are 2 of them, in case you didn't know, NC State versus Purdue. Purdue is a 9-point favorite, and there's a total of 146. Now, Purdue has made it through the tournament, obviously through Zach Edey. And say what you will, he gets some generous calls. We know that. During the Tennessee game, I was rather obnoxious in the first half. I admit that. And I warned you ahead of time. Hey, during this game, I'm going to be generally pretty biased towards Tennessee. I have a lot more riding on the Vols. And if that's something that you don't like, it might be time to mute me during that time. Zach Edey did get away with some calls. Tennessee did get away with some calls, and that's going to happen each and every game, and that's going to happen here in the NC State-Purdue game. You already know that something's going to go awry. Somebody's going to get called for a bad hook. Somebody's going to get called for a charge or a block over the back. Something's going to happen. Now, if we're calling every single call, like apparently the refs in Iowa and UConn want to do, Zach Edey should be sitting with foul trouble early. He's 7'4". He's obviously bigger than most people. He does go over the back a lot. And he did get called for an over the back in the Tennessee game, which was like, oh my God, wow, they do call that. So we'll see just how tight they're going to call this one. But this game could become very ugly very quickly. And from a DFS perspective, your lineups could be unraveled very quickly as well. It's going to be a tough one. Pricing on this particular slate here, it's not horrendous. We've seen tighter. We've seen looser. Don't get too excited, Alex. And this particular slate, it's kind of like moderate, I guess is the best word I can use. Like they've got Zach Edey priced at 11.3, so you're going to have to really make a decision there. Most guys are wedged in this 7K to 8.5 bucket, most of the relevant options that you'd want to start your lineups with. And then you have some really solid underpriced pieces in the 6K range, mid fives, like some of those UConn plays that I'm always on. And, we're going to be on them again. And then you have some speculative value. Guys like Mason Gillis, Lance Jones is really cheap this time. Jaren Stevenson, if you want to chase that. I don't want to chase that. Hassan Diarra, who's been rock solid throughout this tournament. So it's moderate. You can pretty much fit who you want. And if you do want to play Zach Edey for those raw points, you can do so without making major sacrifices to your build. So starting with that, how can our lineups get unraveled here from a Zach Edey or a NC State front court mini stack even perhaps, right? Because the bigs are going to determine this game. This is, I recorded a short earlier and I had mentioned like March is the time for guards. Yes. But this Final Four really looks like it's going to be determined by big men. Mo Diarra, DJ Burns on the NC State side, Zach Edey for Purdue, Donovan Clingan for UConn, Alabama. Grant Nelson, I guess, Nick Pringle. They don't really have a true big man like those other programs do. But honestly, 3 out of the 4 teams with legit bigs, it's going to be a situation where they determine the game. And how is that going to be determined here in the Purdue game? How physical are they going to allow them to play? Obviously, I don't have a Gray Sports Almanac. I wish I did. I don't have a DeLorean. I don't have a time machine. I'm still on the fence about time travel. I fantasize about it a lot, not going to lie. It would be awesome. But overall, I think this one is going to be a really interesting game, and I really hope that they do let them play physical to a degree. I'm really worried, obviously, about the NC State side, and I think most people would be. Looking at the prices, Mo Diarra is the top at 7.3 on the NC State team, and then you have DJ Burns there at 6.7. Both of those prices can do a ton of damage to your lineup. If you take one of them and you whiff hard, it won't be because they don't produce. When they're on the floor, I'm confident both are going to do well. The problem is I'm not confident both are going to be able to remain on the floor going up against Zach Edey and his team of Zebras. Problem here for DJ Burns, he's physical, yes. He's great on offense, but he's not as quick defensively at times like Mo Diarra is with his rim protection, and you'll see him hack. And I'm worried about the times on Edey that he's not going to be in a good position, and they're going to tag him with 2 fouls. It's a very terrifying thing that I think is going to be a realization tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, and I think it's going to come to fruition. I hope it doesn't, but I do think he's going to get into some foul trouble. Now, against Duke, it was Mo Diarra that was saddled with fouls, right? And he only played 22 minutes. It was the first game since NAM that Mo Diarra busted and didn't work out for us. I still love Mo Diarra. I think his ability to hit threes makes him a very tough, difficult, hard-to-guard type of big that Zach Edey, who's very uncomfortable going out and guarding, other front court players, on the perimeter. Diarra can drag you out there. Burns can hit jumpers mid-range level as well. Those two are both going to be able to need to hit those shots. You looked in the Tennessee game, and early on that they ran that little pick and roll action, and Jonas Idu had 3 wide open elbow area jumpers. He missed all 3 badly at that. And they couldn't play him. You saw he played like 10 or 11 minutes. They don't have the luxury to bench Mo Diarra or DJ Burns. They'll just lose if they do. But those 2 guys have to be making shots. And that pick and roll action in the mid-range, it exists. It can happen because Edey's preference is to sag back, right? He wants to be able to protect the rim. He's comfortable back there. If anyone tries to drive into him, he's going to send their stuff packing. He's not going to want to be exposed by coming out to the perimeter or guarding. If they leave DJ Burns and he has that wide open elbow jumper, he's going to hit it. Burns has that ability. Diarra out in the 3-point range, he shoots about 31-32%. He's by no means a sniper, but it's adequate enough to where you have to throw a guy on him. You have to close out. You can't just let him shoot wide open threes all game long because Diarra will take them and he will hit them. He took 3 against Duke, didn't make them. 2 against Marquette, didn't make them, but he has made at least 1 3 in every other game. That's a prop at over 0.5 threes we've been able to bet and have some success with over the last 10, 12 games for Mo Diarra. We already know he's an elite rebounder. It's just the fouls. 5 against Oakland, ended up fouling out there. It was still a really good game for him. That Oakland game went to OT. It was great. Marquette, he had 3, still very good performance. And then Duke, he had the 4. The early 2, the early 3rd, early 4th, ended up playing just 22 minutes. His most ineffective game yet. Definitely a concern for him as well. I'm more concerned for DJ Burns than I am Mo Diarra, and it's going to be a very difficult decision to make because I do want exposure to one of them, and I'll get exposure to both. I mean, I'll run some alt lineups, but I'm thinking in my mind, every time I talk and I do the show and I'm speaking about cores and all that, like I'm considering this from a main lineup standpoint, not just cash and GPP, like the archaic, like, yeah, we can play him in GPP or we can play him in cash. Like we'll throw that out. Main lineup being that most of you that have been regular viewers know what I mean by that. That's whatever lineup you've got most of your action on, right? So maybe you throw that in cash games and GPPs or high dollar or whatever, but whatever lineup you are using with the majority of your dollars on, that's what I'm talking about. And I don't know that Mo Diarra and DJ Burns ultimately end up making the cut for me in my main. Fading them feels bad as well. But they're going to have to be able to hit those mid-range jumpers. They're obviously going to have to be able to hit threes. Purdue has been fortunate. Teams have shot horribly against them. The Vols had them on the ropes in the first half. Up double digits, go ice cold. Big run by Purdue. Second half, they build a little bit of lead, go ice cold. End of story, game over. Zach Edey drops a 40-point game. What can you do? I think the best bet here is for NC State to mirror Tennessee in a way. They were able to contain everybody else on Purdue. Lance Jones, total non-factor offensively. Braden Smith had a nice first half against the Vols. They did a great job limiting him in the second half. 9.77, fine stat line for him, but overall, he only took 6 shots. They kept him off the 3-point line. He was mostly a non-factor offensively. It was just Edey doing everything. Now they lost, and you might say, well, why would they want to replicate that? Because your best bet's still going to be to allow Zach Edey, and I say allow, but basically Edey's going to do what he wants. He's going to take the volume that he wants to get. He usually wins the position battle down low. That's just going to be the reality of the situation. With everybody else, you keep Lawyer from hitting threes. You make Lance Jones, uncomfortable. Braden Smith, you got a hand in his pocket. Like there's nobody else that can really provide them with an offensive look. Trey Kaufman-Renn to a degree. You make shots on the other end, DJ Horn, Casey Morcell, O'Connell, and you start trading those threes for twos, then you really have something. And that's a very simplistic way to look at it, but that's really the way it's going to have to play out here. Edey's going to get his. So looking at it, wait for NC State to win and cover. I do like them to cover in this one. I think you see DJ Horn hitting big shots. I think you see O'Connell hitting big shots. But DFS-wise, this is a spot, one of the first times all year where I've really considered paying the price for Zach Edey. I don't want to. I think this year I've personally probably used him maybe once or twice the entire season, and that might, to new viewers, that might make me look like a complete idiot, and maybe I am. But there's been very few times where we have faded Zach Edey and been like, damn, why did we do that? Slate's over. Like very few times. Even the days when he puts up a 50, still can survive. He dropped a 66 against Tennessee on a smaller slate. Like obviously you're not surviving that. But he's dropping a 46. You can get by that. There's guys $3K cheaper on this slate alone that could outscore him if he drops in the 40s. So you just really are looking to fade him under 50 fantasy points. And sometimes that's easier said than done, especially since I think NC State does allow to get what he, wants. I think he puts up a big number here. I do. So he is somebody that I would be considering. GPP wise, or alt builds is a better term. I want to have that NC State exposure. Now, for my primary build, I am looking at some of these NC State guards, like a Mike O'Connell, who's a little bit high at 5'5", but he's done really good in these situations. Still not looking at Casey Morcell, kind of an inside joke with the regular viewers at this point, but he is only 4.7, which is an interesting price. He's been mid 5K range for the entire tournament. I do think he sees some ownership because of that, and he's playing over 30 minutes. Will have to play well. Jaden Taylor is a really intriguing option. Now, he only played 14 minutes in that last game against Duke, but he has been hovering around 20 in most of their tournament games. And at that price of 3.9, he can definitely do some damage, especially if NC State gets anybody into foul trouble and they have to play a little smaller, or they have to get somebody in there who can at least score. Jaden Taylor could see that minutes boost. So 3.9 is interesting. Now, we do have the word that the freshman, who I really like, Dennis Parker, is going to be there, is going to be dressed. He's cleared at the very least. Will that be a Isaiah Coleman situation with Seton Hall? Perhaps. He showed up to the game for moral support. He didn't end up dressing, so he didn't play, but could this be a similar thing? Parker's missed, 10 plus games at this point. What were they calling it? The flu, but then I think Keats called it mono. So I'm pretty sure with how far he was out, it was indeed mono, Ryan Kalkbrenner disease there. He's only 3K. He's probably not, if he does play, we're looking at probably 3 or 4 minutes. But on the offshoot that he has to play 10 plus, Parker was starting games earlier this season. He oozes potential. Just the main concern here is he hasn't played competitive basketball for a very long time. Over 10 games is a pretty long time, I'd say, for how short the season technically is. Probably not going to work out, but at 3K, it's worth a shot there, especially in large field, because the kid can play and he is very, very good. Other than that, the last guy to really consider, of course, DJ Horn. He had a really nice game against Duke, 7 of 16, hit a couple of threes, 29 fantasy points. Followed that after the Marquette game, in which he had 19 on 4 of 7 3-point shooting, 6 of 15 overall. Expect Horn to have a really good game here. He has to. And I don't worry about that Purdue perimeter quite as much. DJ Horn is not Dalton Connect, but he's a better scorer than Zakai Zeigler. If you guys remember, rewind back here to the Tennessee game, Zeigler had a ton of open looks. He just wasn't hitting them, but he had all these shot attempts that he wanted. He just went ice cold and shot 1 for 8 from long range. Horn's going to have 15 plus shots available to him. The NC State team is a little bit better in terms of consistency, and they're a little more deep than the Vols were. And offensively, they have more guys who can hit shots. Purdue had to focus on Dalton Connect, Zeigler to a degree. Triple J hit some threes in the first half, couldn't do anything in the second half. It basically became defend Dalton Connect, everybody else let them beat you. So they don't have that luxury. NC State has several guys who can hit shots, but I do think Horn ends up drawing at times some of the weaker parts of the Purdue defense, and I do like him as a potential option here. Now, I'm, of course, still looking at a UConn stack. That's what we've been doing all tournament long at low rostership. This is going to be the first slate of the tournament in which UConn is very highly owned. Unfortunate, but we're going to keep doing our thing with UConn. So my exposure to this game in Maine is going to be relatively low compared to UConn, Alabama, and that's unfortunate, but we have to stay with our UConn guys. I do like Middlebrooks at 5-1 to a degree as well, because that's just based on the fact that, hey, Burns is going to get some fouls. DR is going to be in foul trouble. There's going to be fouls in this game. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to call it. We know that's just going to be the case. Now, on the Purdue side, we have some legitimate options that we can consider. If we're not playing Zach Edey, we have nobody else above 8K. Mason Gillis played a lot of minutes, 26 against Tennessee, 27 against Gonzaga. We're in Mason Gillis territory now. That's something that we talked about a few weeks ago as we started to head into the second weekend of the tournament, a week and a half. That Gillis, who, has been playing spot minutes, he's a role player. They moved him out of the starting lineup. He, was a third option on this team a couple of years ago when they made their deep tournament run, if you can remember that already, with Carson Edwards. But he has been just kind of accepting a lower role. Now that they're in the tournament, they need to lean on him more. And defensively, he was really good against the Vols, and he was all over the glass. You saw he had 8 rebounds. He didn't score, but he did everything else. And he does a lot of things that don't necessarily show up in the box score. That doesn't help us as DFS players. But the point is, he's going to be on the floor for a lot closer to 30 minutes than he is to 20 minutes. And he's only 4'6". He won't start, but when that second half gets real and we start having body blows back and forth, Mason Gillis is going to be the one on the floor, even over the likes of Trey Kaufman-Renn. So at 4'6", a guy playing 25 to 30 minutes who has tournament experience, can hit threes, and will have to hit threes in this game, you have to consider Mason Gillis at 4'6". Might not seem like there's a lot of upside there, but it's definitely a play. And I think he's going to be rather low owned because he's bodied in between Trey Kaufman-Renn, or wedged in between Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's there at 4.3, and Lance Jones, who's at 4.9. We've seen a ton of chalk Lance Jones the last couple of Purdue slates. I don't expect that to stop anytime soon, especially with the price reduction here down to 4.9. Playing 30-plus minutes. He was very uncomfortable against Tennessee. Very uncomfortable. You saw he wasn't even taking shots there in the second half. And against Gonzaga, he looked like one of the best players in the game on the first half, and then he completely disappeared in the second half. That's the main worry with Lance Jones. He hasn't been able to put together a complete game, both halves, offensively. Very good defender. That's why he plays so many minutes, and a lot of times he just tires himself out into the offensive end. And there was a comment that the commentators made during the last game from via Matt Painter about Lance Jones, and that sometimes he doesn't allow the game to come to him. He's trying to make a play in a way that forces it. And when you do that, that's when turnovers happen, bad shots happen, and that's something that Lance Jones has been having happen a lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. At 4.9, he might seem like a no-brainer, and he probably is. At the end of the day, I'll probably end up with quite a bit of Lance Jones myself. But at this point, I don't believe he's going to score more than 18 to 20 fantasy points. At 4.9, he doesn't necessarily need to. Smaller slate, we're going to have lower point totals across the board. You just need those raw points where you can get them. Lance Jones at least has a somewhat safer floor at this price, but I don't know if there's going to be a lot of upside there. I worry that he's going to, shoot like 1 for 9 and force a bunch of bad shots, and that NC State energy and the crowd, all that, it's so infectious. I am concerned about a chalk Lance Jones busting out. Hard for him to bust at a 4.9 price tag, but it's definitely possible at like 60% ownership for him to put up a 15. And there's a lot of leverage you could have there if it's a Mason Gillis game. So for a large field, I like the idea of going, Gillis over Jones, Kaufman-Renn over Jones, but it's probably a little bit on the safer side to go Jones there just because he has a better floor than those two. You also have Fletcher Lawyer at 5K. He had one of his best games of the tournament. He was good against Utah State, but he was extremely clutch in that game against Tennessee when they didn't have anyone really able to score besides Zach Edey. Fletcher Lawyer was that guy. He was able to get to the foul line a bunch, hit some shots, 14 real points on his way to 28 fantasy points at 5K. I don't mind Lawyer either. And that's going to be a decision point there because there's going to be a sizable amount of rostership on Jones. I think there'll be a decent chunk on Lawyer and possibly people, using both of them. I mean, we have 2 games to choose from. We don't have a lot of options here. We, might have to use both of those guys. And then way less on Gillis, way less on Kaufman-Renn. Still like Camden Heide. He's there at 3.5. He only played 12 minutes against Tennessee and 11 against Gonzaga. They've been trending in the wrong direction. 0. He bageled against Tennessee. Wasn't great. Still very, very cheap, sub 4K. He's going to have to hit some shots. I mean, he's shown he can hang at this level in small spurts. I do really like Camden Heide. I think he's going to be really solid next year. But it's a very lean, very thin value play that is obviously capable of bageling. Coming into that Gonzaga game, he had scored over 13 fantasy points in 3 straight. We want that version of Camden Heide, not afraid to shoot, hit some shots, go get some rebounds, not standing around. The Tennessee game froze him and quite a lot of others in that game. I don't know that it gets any better here against NC State, but I do think he at least contributes something, especially if he's going to continue to play double-digit minutes, which I think he will. And then you have, I guess, Miles Colvin, Bunny Colvin for Wire fans out there. He doesn't play much, 3-1. You want a super punt where, maybe he gets in and hits a 3, maybe 2. It's potentially there. He did knock down 3 against Utah State. Granted, it was a blowout, so he got that extra run. But the kid can obviously play. Overall, this is the game where, I'm going to get some pieces from 1 or 2, maybe more. But we're stacking up UConn. We've been stacking UConn all tournament long. Everybody stacks Alabama games in this tournament, so we're going to be chalky. We're going to be, on a lot of similar plays as everybody else. But the UConn stack has proven to be profitable throughout the tournament. And I still think there's a conglomerate of people out there we're going to galaxy brain this one and not stack, 4 guys from UConn against Bama and try to go elsewhere. But UConn has been just awesome, and they continue to pay off for us in a rather handsome fashion. Moving on to that game here, Bama versus UConn. It's an 11.5 point spread in UConn's favor and a total of 160.5. So we have 2 games that Vegas says they're going to be rather, comfortable wins for Purdue and UConn. And maybe that's the case. Maybe Bama and NC State they're out of gas. They don't have much left. Maybe that's the case. All right. I don't want to see that. Totally got derailed here. My family is messaging me about the upstairs bathroom. That's always fun. All right, let's look at some comments. This is a good point to stop and look at some comments here while I hope that the toilet upstairs is not overflowing. The appliance money. We'll need to get some appliance money going here. Can DJ Horn be effective? Player points prop over 16.5. Absolutely. I mean, it's not like oh hell yeah, I'm a slam dunk that one. There's some on this slate where I'm like, yes, let's go. But I mean, he's got to score. He's got to score 20 real for them to win. The front court it's just going to be such a high variance spot for the front court because of the element of Zach Edey drawing so many fouls. The ref's afraid to not call them or call them on Zach Edey. So I don't think we can really touch the props for Burns or Diarra unless we're hitting the unders. But that's, who wants to hit an under for Mo Diarra, DJ Burns? Like, geez, are you fun at parties or what? But I do think, yeah, that's theoretically, that's one he should be. I mean, he's going to take 15 plus shots. What I am confident in is that he's going to take 15 to 20 shots, 5-6 free throws. So if you think that is in an area that he's going to be efficient on shooting the basketball, then yeah, over 16.5 is a rather good spot. Purdue defensively, they've been good, but they don't scare me like UConn does. They don't scare me like Houston did. So I do think Horn is going to have to deliver a relatively strong game here. You'll see there's some games where he played under 30 minutes or, 31, 32. This will not be one of those games, barring like, uncharacteristic foul trouble, which did happen. What was it in the, I think it was the Marquette game, right? And he got into some foul trouble there and lost some minutes. Look for him to play 37, 38 minutes. So plenty of opportunities here for him to hit that over 16.5. I'll look at his updated PRA as well. Been trying to stay away from PRA, but this does seem like if it's a Horn, like 22, 23.5 PRA, this seems like a major slam over in that way as well. Hey, my man, what is up? This guy. I love how we have like inside jokes and personalities and stuff on the show where new viewers are probably like, man, this guy is a moron. Good to see you. I appreciate it. He, same time zone. Well, yeah, pretty close. My man Alex, he's the NC State super fan, long-time community member. He is there in Arizona to watch his team play in the Final Four, partying it up with all the celebrities. He's out there with Jason Sudeikis right now, kicking it. And appreciate you stopping by and supporting myself and just the community in general. Really awesome. I am excited and can't wait to see all of the goodness that you're going to bestow upon us here and all the stories that you're going to tell us when you get back, man. Enjoy it. It's going to be like a life-changing experience, and especially if they can seal the deal. So good to see you, man. Appreciate it. Enjoy your party. Go Pack. I'm crashing the field of 68 set. I'll have to go watch it after this. See you in the background there. Hope you got a sign or something, or a t-shirt, or at least. I hope you're bringing back t-shirts, man. I need one. I need to add to the collection back here. All right. We got Don Place here. What's up, my man? How you like Caravan points? I think it's over 13.5. Yeah, we're gonna get into UConn here in a minute. All right. Yeah, let's get into that. So with UConn, again, been stacking them up all tournament long, and they've had low rostership. Even the last slate that was 4 games, like people weren't really using UConn guys. My man Cam Spencer still coming in under 30% ownership. I do not think we'll be super lucky to have him come in under 30% ownership on a 2-game slate, but if people are going to continue to fade, we'll gladly continue to run 90 to 100% exposure rate to Cam Spencer. He is amazing. This UConn team is a true juggernaut. What they did last year was like totally ridiculous, right? Set an NCAA record, 6 games by 13 plus points victory. Just like an unflappable squad. This year's, and then they lose 3 or 4 key pieces, but here we are back in the NCAA tournament again, and they're even more dominant. They have been winning games by an average of 27.8 points per game, and their point differential is plus 111. Think about that for a second. You don't see teams go on a 30-0 run in the Elite Eight, even when it is like, go back to decades ago, George Mason making their Final Four run. Some of the other, like St. Peter's going deep in the tournament, like these teams that get into the Elite Eight that are Cinderellas, you don't see them give up 30-0 runs, but a legitimate offense and team like Illinois, 30-0, like it was 23 up, and then they proceed to just go on a massive, massive streak. Dan Hurley also is just got to be in the conversation for best coach right now, not ever. I'm not getting crazy. And I know Bill Self still has that title of best coach right now. Some could say maybe Tom Izzo. Like, I respect those guys, right? But Dan Hurley, if he wins this one and they go into next year with their championship window wide open, which is the same thing I said last year after they won, like this championship window is not closing anytime soon. They're going to own the portal. They're going to recruit at a high level, which the class they brought in, think about how crazy it is. The class that they brought in with all the 5 stars, one of the best in the country, Stephen Castle is the only one that started, and Jalen Stewart and Castle are the only ones who played any kind of significant minutes. Everybody else in that class hardly played. And it's worth noting that Hurley is, during his interviews, he's like practically publicly begging Jalen Stewart not to hit the portal next year and saying, the keys to the car are yours, Jalen Stewart. Like, you're going to be a big star next year. That's how good this team is and how many options they have. But Dan Hurley is a master at halftime adjustments. And going into the Illinois game, there were a lot of people like, well, this Illinois offense, Terry Shannon, like, this is it. They're gonna give UConn problems. And I remember saying, there may be a time at halftime where it looks like, man, Illinois is in this. Illinois is they're hitting shots. They're doing exactly what they needed to do. It might be time to panic. But you have to remove that modifier there and account for Dan Hurley's halftime adjustments, because he is the best right now. His level of halftime adjustments is up there with Jay Wright. Jay Wright during his, little mini dynasty there at Villanova, and he was always great. He was always good, and people really didn't appreciate Jay Wright for what he was until he won those titles. But you'll remember the way he was able to adjust, like something's not going their way, halftime, boom. Whatever that problem was, it's removed from the equation. That's what Coach Hurley and UConn are able to do. Terry Shannon, they just, from this first moment of the game, they decided, like, it won't be him. Terry Shannon not going to defeat us. Marcus Domas dropped 14 to 16 points in the first half. They decided that wasn't going to continue. And in the second half, they held them below 4. So you have to account for all of these things when it comes to UConn and this Alabama team. Like, they've been doubted. Like myself, I felt like, they'll beat Charleston, and they did. But I thought Grand Canyon, like, good luck. Grand Canyon's way too good. That's going to be a really fun matchup. I asked for that matchup before the bracket even was released. I got it. The result is not what I expected. every time Alabama's been counted out in this tournament, they've pulled through. The Grand Canyon win especially, I thought, wow, they won that one in a low-scoring fashion. That was very surprising to me. The North Carolina game, it took a legendary performance by Grant Nelson that I did not see coming. And then the Clemson game, Clemson's little magic there ran out. Bama's they're hitting shots. And to win this game against UConn, they're clearly going to have to shoot bonkers from long range. However, enter Danny Hurley's halftime adjustments. Dan Hurley is so much better at those adjustments than Bobby. Let's be real here. And obviously they're going to make the decision to treat Mark Sears the way they treated Terry Shannon. They're going to bump him. They're going to be physical, and it's going to be no, not you, someone else in this first half. Whoever that is in the half, whether that's Aaron Estrada or Grant Nelson, or maybe it's Latrell Wrightsell who's coming back from injury, puts on a little bit of a strong performance in the first half. Well, going into halftime, I will bet you, I'll bet a significant amount of money that whoever that is that has a good first half on Alabama doesn't have a good second half, because they're not going to allow it. My hope here is we get another gift-wrapped live betting opportunity where Bama is red hot from long range, hitting shots. They build like a 3, 4, 5-point lead heading into halftime. I don't think the books will be that dumb, but if we do get a opportunity where, UConn is plus money, won't happen, but if maybe -2, something like that at half, like it's one of those, we say it in jest, generational wealth opportunities. And like we say that in a joking manner, but it really could be. Because UConn's not going to lose this game. And if it's close, it's only going to be close up to halftime. So that's the betting looks at it. I think UConn ultimately covers 11.5 because they're beating opponents by an average of 27.8. And yes, it's the Final Four, but Alabama doesn't have they don't have an elite big man. They have solid big men, but Nick Pringle, who played really well in their last game, do not get me wrong, going up against this UConn defense, Donovan Clingan and Samson Johnson, who are monsters, rim-protecting fiends, and elite rebounders. That's going to be tough for Pringle, and foul issues will exist. Grant Nelson already had the game of his life against an upper-tier competition team, which he doesn't normally do. Does he have a second one in his bag here for this tournament? Maybe. But I don't foresee 24-12 against UConn. If he does, I will literally, advocate for that kid to be a first-round draft pick and never doubt him again, because that would truly be astonishing. So if it's not Grant Nelson and it's not Nick Pringle, they have to play Moag. They have to play Diabate, both very raw. Neither one of those guys are going to be able to deal with that interior. Like there's so few ways Alabama can win this game or even compete in this game, let alone win it. And it's going to have to be behind just elite 3-point shooting. The problem is, all tournament long, we've seen some pretty porous shooting from teams that we normally don't. And we're going into a situation where playing games in a non-basketball setting. Rims are going to be tight. And maybe I'm looking into this way too much, but I think that we're going to see some pretty horrendous shooting. That's going to favor some of the physical teams. That's why Purdue's, NC State can get physical as well. But UConn, to the level of physicality that they're going to employ, I just don't think Alabama has that gear. They deserve all the credit in the world for making the Final Four. Nate Oates has been fantastic. They've hit shots when they need to hit shots. And you can only truly play who's in front of you in the tournament, whether you get a good draw or not. And remember, the UConn draw, when it came out, it was like, oh my God, the bracket of death. How could they do this to the number 1 seed overall? Like, there's so many pitfalls. They're beating opponents by an average of almost 30 points per game. But you can only play who's in front of you. And I'll say Alabama, the North Carolina win, that was a good win. That was a great win. That was a program-changing win. Clemson was good. Grand Canyon was good. Charleston was good. But, that path, I don't know that it prepared them for UConn. And that might be like a really ludicrous thing to say. But I just don't think that they're going to be able to do it. So I don't want a ton of Alabama exposure. Now we're in the 2-game slate territory where, I didn't want to target against Houston. I didn't want to target against UConn. I wasn't willing to do it until at least 4-game slates. Certainly don't have a choice on a 2-game slate. And we do have some relatively cheap pricing on Alabama. Now, I would love to see people chase Jaron Stevenson. He could do a lot of damage to us if he's chalky, like 50% owned at 4K, and he drops the 30 piece again. He's 5 of 8 from long range. But the chances of that happening again from a player who normally delivers 7 to 8 fantasy points are very low. So I'm willing to fade somebody like that, even though he's cheap at 4K, but get a chance of him putting up a 2x score. He's not shooting 5 of 8 against UConn. Also, another thing going against him is the fact that Latrell Wrightsell is returning and will be available. He's in and out of the concussion protocol, had the injuries, missed the last 2 games, could only play 11 against Grand Canyon. But you look at how he played against Charleston, hit 5 triples in that one. He's been a big-time scorer, and especially the last month or 2 of the season, he really stepped his game up and became a third option for them behind Estrada and behind Mark Sears and even in front of Nelson. So they need Wrightsell. How many minutes can he give them? Enough to negatively impact Jaron Stevenson? Definitely. Enough to negatively impact Sam Walters? Definitely. Rylan Griffin's still probably the best overall Bama play when you consider the price and opportunity. Now, Wrightsell being back should diminish him a little bit as well, theoretically, but I don't think I don't think Nate Oates is going to pull his minutes suddenly and play him like 20. You got to keep playing Griffin 30 because he's a big reason why you got there, and he stepped up in a big way against North Carolina, and he was massive in that Clemson game. The passes he was making, the facilitating, the distribution, and just everything that he did that I did not see him doing in that Clemson game was massive. 8 assists for Rylan Griffin, which is really probably more of an outlier, but he looked fantastic. They need that version of Rylan Griffin, and he's not going to be the priority of the UConn defense. So to me, Rylan Griffin is the guy that you can play and feel okay about on the Alabama side. Mark Sears is relatively cheap for his upside at 8.4, and you can sit here and tell me he's matchup proof. He's going to get a ton of volume. Like, how could we possibly consider fading him on a 2-game slate? And I only need to go back to the last game with Illinois and a similar player to Mark Sears, a high volume, high usage scorer that had put up big numbers against all sorts of opponents, easy to hard. And he goes into it against, how good was he against Iowa State? Like the Cyclones game, dropping 29 on the Cyclones defense. Like that, to me, that was impressive. And that made a lot of people into a lull. Like, if he can do that against Iowa State, he can do that against UConn. But the problem is there's most teams, and then there's UConn. UConn is not most teams. And they held Terry Shannon to 8 points. Marcus Domass, 17. He had 14 of those in the first half. Basically just decided, no, you're not going to score. So I'm really worried for Mark Sears. I think that there's a big time leverage opportunity with fading him because the price of 8.4 for a caliber player like Sears, it is low. It is cheap. Like when I look at just starting to get projections in, at 39 minutes, he's overvalued there. But I'm really worried. I mean, I'm not expecting him to put up 40, and the sheet doesn't either. It has him at 34. It's just a tough matchup. He's going to be the priority. They're going to be in his shorts, and it's just a very tough situation there. I do think there's merit to using Aaron Estrada because of his strong peripherals and what else he offers besides scoring. So a rough and tumble physical type of game may benefit Aaron Estrada. It wouldn't have with his role in Hofstra the last couple of years, but he's playing and operating in a different role here for Alabama. And what I saw out of him in the last couple of games, I'm really impressed with the way Estrada hasn't been rattled even one time during this entire tournament. And he wasn't really a big scorer against Clemson. He's just delivering such strong peripheral stats. He shot 3 of 13, but he still put up nearly 30 fantasy points against Clemson. That shows you what Estrada is doing. So I do think he's a pretty intriguing overall option. I don't like Nelson. I know he's cheap at 6.2. I don't like Nick Pringle. I know he's cheap at 5'9". He just dropped to 40. So people are, within the industry are going to chase Nick Pringle and Jaron Stevenson. That's going to be a line in the sand spot for me, whether I'm right or wrong. I'm going to go to bed just fine either way. If Pringle goes off against UConn, tip my cap and say, you know what? I was beaten today. Really don't think Nick Pringle's even going to be able to make it to 20 minutes against this UConn team. Not because he's not conditioned or anything, but I just think he's going to hack. He's going to hack his way there. Klingon is going to deliver a methodical, almost medieval type of performance that's going to demoralize this Alabama front court. When I look at what they have in the front court, I'm struggling to see who is going to be able to deal with Klingon. I just don't see it. So Rylan Griffin, if you want Bama exposure, I do think Estrada is a pretty tasty morsel of an option there in large field. But overall, we're going with this UConn stack. We've played it every Husky slate. Usually centers around Cam Spencer and Alex Caravan. I know Caravan hasn't been great lately, but he's still cheap at $6K. Stephen Castle's only 5'8". Donovan Klingon is the most expensive at 8'3", but really that's, the matchup, considering that he's dropped 50 plus in 2 of his last 3. Obviously like him there. And then we're getting just a blatant misfire. The DK pricing team on Tristan Newton, he had a horrendous game against Illinois. 0 for 6, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, totally uninvolved in that game. Illinois defensively, they stepped it up against the Cyclones. Very impressed. They sort of stepped up individually on UConn, specifically Tristan Newton. They did a nice job on him. He was priced at 8.4 then. He bricked hard at 15 fantasy points. They drop him to 7.9. Huge misfire. Do not fade Tristan Newton in this game. This is a matchup in which he will have a lack of a better term, a maniacal type of game. I'm expecting Tristan Newton to go slate breaker plus here. The wonderful thing about UConn and what makes them so dangerous is the fact that if Newton has a bad game, it doesn't matter. They have Cam Spencer. They have Donovan Klingon. They have Stephen Castle. Donovan Klingon has a bad game. It doesn't matter. Cam Spencer has a bad shooting night. It doesn't matter. Just have The Rock here with me talking about it. It doesn't matter because it really doesn't. I'm expecting Klingon to do basically whatever he wants down low. I think he has a big game, but I also think Tristan Newton asserts himself early and often in this one. I think we see him take on a much more of a scoring role early. And then I think in the second half, he kind of flips the switch into more of the facilitator, and you see him coast into a double-double, whether that's 18 and 10 for the assists or, 13 and 10, something like that. It doesn't matter. I'm calling the double-double here for Newton with assists. I think he has 10 or 11 dimes. I think he scores 15 to 16 real points at minimum. He's going to have a huge game. I do suspect he'll be relatively popular because sharper players are going to know 7'9" Tristan Newton. It's a gift. You hope that people look at game logs, and some will, some of the more casual players, but anyone that's played this year any significant amount of time knows Tristan Newton at 7'9" is a freebie play. It just is. So if you need more convincing, let's pull up the old Ken Pom page here, which UConn is number 1 offensively per Ken Pom now, by the way. All right. The tape, if you will, on Tristan Newton. He's second on the Ken Pom Player of the Year rankings. Thoroughly impressive. Playing 82.4% of the available minutes, highest on the team. Big shocker. 17.2% defensive rebounding rate. That probably surprises you. I bet you didn't think he did that. 21% combined rebounding rate. So yes, he rebounds. 31% assist rate, top 50 in the country. Draws about 5 fouls per 40. He only shoots 32% from long range. You'd like to see that a little bit higher, but he can hit them, and he does, and he's actually rather clutch when the time comes. He just misses a lot in between. 81% free throw shooter. He's the guy at the end of the game. Beside him, Cam Spencer's the guy you really want at the end of the game shooting free throws, but Newton is adequate as well. And overall, a really, really solid and strong player. When you look at UConn from last year and the title run that they made, Sonogo, obviously, Jordan Hawkins was crazy, but you go back and Andre Jackson, who was, just a threat for triple doubles. But Tristan Newton had a really huge, to do with them winning. He wasn't so much throughout their first couple of rounds games. Like, he was a moderate scorer, but he averaged just about 5 or 6 dimes per game. He had 10 rebounds in the Natty win over SDSU. Had 19 points. Like, you really saw right in front of our eyes in the national title game. Like, if he comes back, that was the passing of the torch. Tristan Newton stepping up when it mattered and when he had to. That game didn't end up being that close, but it was for a little bit. This is a game in which I think Tristan Newton reminds people of who he is, what he's capable of, and it would be a really big misfire and mistake to not have Tristan Newton in your primary build. If you run one lineup only, it needs to have Tristan Newton. I do not think this is a spot where you want to get cute. Get cute on date night with your wife or significant other. Don't get cute here by fading Tristan Newton. I am going right back to Cam Spencer. That's my guy. Like, hashtag Waltz guys. There are several throughout the years. Cam Thomas, Posh Alexander. For this tournament, it's been Cam Spencer, and we have absolutely been just obliterating anyone fading Cam Spencer. The game he had against SDSU was phenomenal, but that game against Illinois, he only scored 11 points. We missed his point prop, but I don't care. Throw that out. 41 against Illinois, 41 fantasy points. If I told you ahead of time, Cam's going to hit 40 tonight for fantasy-wise, you'd probably be like, okay, so he's scoring 30 real. And that would be a valid thought. But 11 real points, he showed he's so much more than just a three-point shooter. 12 rebounds against an Illinois team, 5 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Man was out there blocking shots and grabbing rebounds. Now, obviously, to think he's going to get 12 rebounds again would be a silly proposition. That's not going to happen. But he's been grabbing 4 to 5 rebounds in every single tournament game. He's typically good for 15 to 16 real points. He'll get us a steal or two. He's going to drop 3 to 5 assists. He's still only 7-2. The price has been going up, but it's still not high enough. Cam Spencer is way too cheap. He plays a ton of minutes. If the game is close and Alabama's able to, to the final horn, you're going to be talking about a 37, 38 minutes for Cam Spencer. Now, if the game is just blown out and second half they demoralize Alabama, like probably going to happen, then we're talking more like 33-ish minutes for Cam Spencer, but he's still going to hit the over, 4 or 5x there because his price is way too cheap. And this matchup with Alabama, he's going to have any shot that his heart desires. So I'm very big on Cam Spencer. Now, the stack is going to be Spencer and Newton for sure. And then it's probably going to be like Castle Caravan or Caravan Diarra. There's going to be a lot of people who maybe can't get to Donovan Clingan. I think we can make that stack work with Newton, Spencer, and Clingan. We're obviously not going to be able to play Edey, Diarra, those guys if we go that route, but I think it's probably the right move. Donovan Clingan does not have, or I should say Alabama does not have a 1-for-1 perimeter interior defender. Sometimes the mouth doesn't match the brain. And he's just going to be able, I think they feed him. Obviously, like I said, Newton's going to be going in the first half. Like they're going to be getting him, shot after shot and really setting the tone. But once you get into the second half where UConn starts doing that thing where they put their foot on the throat of their opponents, that'll be done through Donovan Clingan post-ups repeatedly. And they'll happen in the first half as well. But I think what you see out of Clingan is a lot of putbacks in the first half off of those Newton and Spencer shots. And then you're talking about featuring Clingan in the second half. And that's just going to start demoralizing Bama. And that's also going to take them out of any possible rhythm they're in. You don't want to run with Alabama, clearly. UConn can do that if they need to. But dragging it out, making them, sucking the life out of them in the half court is the best way to do that. How can you do that? Well, Donovan Clingan post-ups on a guy like Nick Pringle, who's getting a little handsy, Grant Nelson, who's not strong enough, Mo Diabate, who has a bright future but is too raw. Like Donovan Clingan should be an absolute monster in the second half. And he might be throughout the entire game, but I think in the second half, you're going to see Donovan Clingan just eat hard. And you look at it, minutes are no issue. The blowouts lead to Clingan playing in the low 20s, but that doesn't matter. He needed only 22 minutes against Illinois to hit 54. He needed only 27 minutes against Northwestern to hit 52. Played 20 against Stetson. I used him against Stetson. Why would I do that? That's going to be a blowout. Well, our man, Mike Kutry, who mentioned, these matchups against lower seeds, they can't defend the paint. Look what Armando Bacot does in round 1. He went off. Look what Donovan Clingan can do in round 1. He went off to 36 in 20 minutes. His fantasy point per minute number has always been outrageous. He is extremely efficient. He is a rim protecting monster. And it just seems like UConn is going to deliver a really, really strong, borderline legendary performance here heading into the Natty. And I think what that means is, not just Clingan going off, not just Newton, but we're talking about 3, 4, maybe even 5 Husky players making value. And maybe that's just 4X. Maybe that's 5X. Maybe Bama pushes UConn into a corner where they've got to score 100 points. And if they do, you're going to be talking about the optimal with 4 to 5 Huskies on it. And stacks in college basketball are way more profitable than still to this day people realize. Looking at now this is unedited, meaning I haven't edited any minutes and I haven't accounted for Latrell Wrightsell back yet. I'm talking about the projection sheet that our Discord and FTN site members get, in the morning it'll be out. Our projection sheet that we just started this year, by the way. If you're considering FTN for next season, we are working our way into a one-stop shop. We offer articles. We have the projection sheet. Optimizer is on the horizon. We already have it for pro sports. But anyways, I digress. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots on the sheet, and this is from a X value. So I sort it by, value, the return. The first 5 spots are manned by UConn players. Then there are 3 Purdue. Then there's an NC State, and then a UConn player again. Now, again, I need to edit the minutes and account for some things. So that'll change it. But you can rest assured that most projections at this point are going to have a lot of UConn near the top. Tristan Newton is just way too cheap at 7.9. He's projecting over 5X. Cam Spencer at 7.2. In this matchup against Alabama, it's laughable. He's over 5X. Donovan Clingan even at 8.3. Maybe that's a little bit too high. Let's see. At 26 minutes, he projects nearly 5X. Let's give him 22. Let's say maybe he only plays low 20s. Still projects at 35 to 36 fantasy points because of his rates, and Alabama has nobody to defend him. Really simple. Stephen Castle, we haven't even talked about him yet. He's going to be a first-round draft pick, and he's not even the best player on his team, but he has the most upside. 5'8", it's a no-brainer, right? He should coast into 30 fantasy points. He can. Now, Caravan's the wild card here, and I think people are going to ignore him for the most part. Now, it's a 2-game slate, so he's guaranteed to get 20% ownership minimum because there's not enough options to get his ownership down below that. People are going to be doing stacks. People are going to be doing alt builds. But on a 2-game slate below 30% ownership of any UConn players, they have to be considered a near must play. And calling Caravan that might sound silly, but he's only 6K. He's very much struggled in the tournament. He hasn't found his footing. We've seen every other UConn guy in the rotation, not Jalen Stewart, he hasn't had a huge game, but Hassan Diarra off the bench has had a couple of big games. Newton's had a monster earlier in the tournament. Spencer's had a couple of monsters. Clingan's had some monsters. We haven't had a massive Caravan game in the tournament. Closest was in the SDSU game. In the first half, he was hot. He had like 20 at halftime, fantasy points, ended with 24. Not a great second half. He only shot 3 of 11. The point is the volume's there. He's going to be in a spot here against Alabama where rebounds are going to be plentiful. He's going to have opportunities to create turnovers. And the shot attempts are going to be there. He hasn't shot particularly great on a volume standpoint, but he has been adequate. We need him to hit threes. Bottom line on Caravan, we need him to hit 3 threes. That's the magic number. If you're playing Caravan, you're watching the game or you're looking at the box score, you want to see 3 triples out of Caravan. That's going to indicate a really confident Alex Caravan, and he's going to be able to carry that over. So we need to see those shots falling, and we need to see those shots taken. You might think, well, damn, how is there going to be enough volume for all of these guys? They're playing Alabama, one of the fastest teams in the country that plays that, run and gun style. They're going to be shooting a lot of threes. There's going to be a ton of rebounding opportunities, fast break opportunities. And overall, Caravan is going to be one of the least worried about players on the floor for that Alabama defense. Has to hit shots. Simply has to make shots. Only 6K, potentially below 30% ownership. Alex Caravan is a sneaky, sneaky option. And people might even just be afraid to play 4 or 5 UConn. I'm not. I know most of our community's not, but that might be the case. That takes us down to Hassan Diarra. He's the only other player outside of the starting 5 for UConn that is main team viable. He's only 4-4. He is an excellent value. He makes way too much sense. He's going to play a minimum of 20 minutes. He's their 6th man. He's the primary bench guy. Samson Johnson, he spells Klingon a bit. And then Jalen Stewart, the very high upside Frosh. He comes in and gets some minutes and spells the guys, for a couple minute water breaks. But for the most part, it's Diarra and the starters. Only 4-4. He's been taking a ton of shots the last couple of games. Very comfortable. He is a veteran, folks. He is not backing down. Back-to-back games of double digits, real scores and fantasy points. 17 against Illinois, 23 against SDSU. Only 4-4. He just seems like a mortal lock to give us close to 20 fantasy points in this spot, especially if any of the UConn guys get into foul issues or how tight the officials want to call the game. Diarra has potential to play even more. And his nice thing is he gets out there with the first unit. If it gets out of hand, he's out there with the second and third unit. Like, he's just so protected from any and all type of game script. Blowout, 20 minutes. Close game, 20 minutes. So we know what we're going to get there out of Hassan Diarra. Makes sense. To me, one of the better values on the slate, all 2 games that we have. If you really want to get tricky, near min price Jalen Stewart, perhaps there's an opportunity for him to play a little bit more. He had 11 minutes against Illinois. He's just, there's not going to be a lot of shot opportunities there for him, at least until the midway point through the second half. It depends on if you think this is going to be a true blowout situation. Now, ordinarily, like on showdowns, I'm fine to take a near min price guy and take a low score, but I do think this one we want to prioritize raw points. So going Jalen Stewart, just maybe not in the cards there for us, even though he is only near min price. Samson Johnson there at 3.8. I do think we see a spike in ownership there to a degree. Again, another guy playing about 15 to 18 minutes. If Klingon gets into foul trouble, Samson's the main guy coming in there. Great matchup. I foresee him getting some, decent chunk of block shots here, maybe some putbacks. We'll see. But at 3.8, that's a reasonable price to pay for Samson Johnson here. And shoot, maybe there's a lineup out there. We just run 6 or 7 UConn guys. Hey, it worked in the past, running 6 Indiana State guys. Who knows? Maybe it works for UConn as well. All right, let's reel in here. 2-game slate. I expect nothing less but to go over an hour. You guys are still here. So that's the slate. That is the slate. Core-wise, it's really easy. Tristan Newton, we're going to be overlapped with the field. Sometimes you just got to do that. I want to get a cheapie in there. For me, that's going to be Hassan Diarra. There's obviously Lance Jones on the Purdue side, some other cheapies there that we've talked about. I think ownership will spike higher on Lance Jones. And if you're running 4 UConn guys and you're not comfortable playing Diarra, then I get it. And that'd be Lance Jones. But 4-4 Diarra, that'd be core play number 2 for me. 2 UConn guys, yes. Third core play, 2-game slate. I don't usually like to give 3. But I'm going to bestow upon, and this is usually something I say for Cam Spencer, but I just can't imagine we get him at low ownership. So I'd love it to be Cam Spencer, but I'm going to say Alex Caravan, and he's going to be the posh play of the day. What's the posh play of the day? Some of you may ask. Our version of a sneak or projected low ownership type of play. Now it's a little bit more difficult on a 2-game slate to actually find somebody to fit that mold, but I do think Caravan is going to project well, number 1, but number 2, he just hasn't been that great and clearly down the pecking order list. So I think a lot of people will find a way away from Caravan. Castle's 5'8". I suspect more people would play Castle. At this point, I just want to run every UConn guy that gets minutes, but I'll temper expectations maybe to a degree and not expose myself too much. But I just can't imagine a UConn stack not being optimal. So we're going to go Alex Caravan as the posh play, Tristan Newton and Hassan Diarra as the primary cores. Yes, 3 UConn Huskies in the core. We're really digging our heels in, and we're saying UConn or bust. I don't believe they'll lose. I don't believe they'll underperform. The prices on UConn guys are hysterically low. How can we not end up with 3, 4, 5 of them in our lineups? We just can't. We have to do it. We have to do it. All right, let's go to prize picks because we hit a pretty solid look in the women's games here. Let's see. Prize pick screen is all wonky. They were late with plays last time. I know they're here. It is. Man, they got everything. Cricket, AFL, esports. I was talking to Adam actually the other day, one of our editors. We were discussing how it doesn't feel like the pandemic was that long ago, but then you start thinking about like we were grinding NASCAR, which is around all the time. AFL, Aussie football. Like I got really into that for a while. KBO, you guys remember that? Still a thing, but like having DFS for that stuff and esports, of course. And now it's like so weird to just not have that in our lives very much, or at least from DFS standpoint. I think I'd still be kind of interested if they had Aussie football, but it's just random thoughts that we have here. All right. There is no women's college basketball props up yet on Prize Picks. I wanted to check some of the South Carolina ones out, but we will have to wait until probably tomorrow for that. So looking at the men's side, I want to start on the fantasy point totals. They've risen Cam Spencer a little bit each time. He was at 26.5 a couple of games ago. We slammed the over, hit it, walked to the window, loved it. Then they raised it to 28.5 last game. We hit it. He got there, walked it to the window, all good. Now it's 30.5, so it's gone up again. You look at Tristan Newton, 34.5, Donovan Clingan, 36.5, Castle, 22.5, and Alex Caravan, 24. So you have a variety of fantasy markers here. I do really like that Newton call, so we'll say over 34.5, but I'm still going to maintain on Cam Spencer over 30.5 fantasy points. He's just so good. Not only hitting shots, but just contributing in other categories. Like 12 rebounds is phenomenal. I don't expect him to do that, as I said, but 5 or 6 boards is a reasonable expectation. Love Cam Spencer. He gets steals, over 30.5 fantasy points, extra points for blocks and steals. Let's roll that on Cam Spencer. Moving over to the other game here. DJ Horn's fantasy total is 25.5. I do like the over there. Earlier, we were asked about his point total at 16.5. It's not a featured play for me, but I will reiterate for those tuning in late, I do like it. I think if NC State's going to win, clearly he's going to have to score 20 actual points. The other point totals, and again, Prize Picks has the Goblin plays, which is a lower total, less payout. Demon plays, higher total, higher payout. So I like to reference those and plug some of those in. Braden Smith has a Goblin point prop of 7.5. That's an obvious over. Put that with something else. His normal prop is 11.5. I do like that as well. And then we have DJ Horn over 11.5 points, which is a Goblin play, a very easy one at that. And then let's see here. Cam Spencer over 15.5 points. I do think he delivers more this time. I was asked by Don there, Alex Caravan of 13.5 points. Like, if there's a time for him to finally produce, he's like one of the last UConn guys in their 6-7 man rotation, not 2. Have a big game. I think that this would be the time to do so. I would, if you're going to go a Caravan prop and you're on Prize Picks, I would prefer to just take his fantasy total over 24. If you're on, DK, FanDuel, any of those for props, then yeah, 13.5 points makes sense. His PRA number sits at 20. I think I would lean into that more than the point total just because he does get rebounds and an assist or two. So over 20 points, rebounds, and assists for Alex Caravan would be where I would try to lean there. But the 13.5 is definitely in play. Cam Spencer's points, rebounds, and assist prop has been sitting around 21, 22 all tournament long. We've been slamming that over. It currently sits at 24.5 on Prize Picks and DK. I would just on Prize Picks hit his points and his fantasy total. But the 24.5 is still in play if you want to go there for sure. And then I have an under. They made Purdue's pretty low outside of Zach Edey. Let's see here. So I do like NC State to compete. I do like NC State to score, but I do not like Casey Morsell's point prop, which sits at 10.5. That would be an under 10.5 that I like on Casey Morsell. So that is one of the few unders we'll provide here. Let's go to 3-pointers and see if we got our Diarra play. They haven't been giving it to us lately. Looks like we won't be getting it again, but there is a freebie goblin play for Michael O'Connell over 0.5 3-pointers made. Obviously, lesser payout there, but that is a gimme. He's going to make at least 1 3. That's a pretty obvious one there. And then one more. There was a points and rebounds number that was cheap. Castle over 15.5 points plus rebounds. We haven't talked a lot about him tonight. Obviously love him though in the UConn stack. He's a great price on DK. That prop, he's going to contribute a lot in all categories, but points and rebounds, we can really make money with that. So over 15.5 points plus rebounds for Stephen Castle. All right, that will take us to the end. Just want to check over on DK. There are a few props here. A lot of them will be similar to Prize Picks. Starting with the Casey Morsell number, under 10.5 points. It's minus 125. Again, I very rarely look at unders. They're no fun. They are profitable, though. But that is one that I feel pretty comfortable about, under 10.5 on Morsell. I do like Michael O'Connell over 7.5, which is plus 105. He's just becoming a big-time shot maker and showing up in big spots. So one final big spot for him before the potential title game. So over 7.5 there for him. And then we are looking at Tristan Newton over 16.5 points, minus 125. Cam Spencer over 15.5 points, also at minus 125. The Spencer combo at 24.5 is minus 125. Still like the over. Caravan we get actually at 19.5 points, rebounds, and assists. So that'll be the Caravan prop that I'm hitting on DK. That'll be in the tracker as well, but minus 125 over 19.5 points, rebounds, and assists for Alex Caravan. We're playing that Caravan game. We want it. We're going to get it. All right, all of the betting plays we talked about tonight, plus the great Mike Kutry and everybody else on the CBB team will have their trackers loaded up before the games over on ftnbets.com. If you're not a member, definitely check it out. There's a lot of great content there, not just written articles, but there's also shows, both public and private for subs. Those kind of shows, again, Alex, don't get too excited. And also, a myriad of other options. We have simulations. We have projections on the DFS side. We have a myriad of things that can help you be profitable. And we generally cover everything sports-wise, pro sports and college sports to offer. With that being said, I think that will wrap us up. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me pre-Final Four, Christmas Eve. The tournament's really Christmas Eve before that, but this is it. Last classic slate. Tip gets underway at 6:09 p.m. EST, 3:09 over there for us West Coasters. Get whatever honey-do list errands that you've got to get done that's on your list early. Like I got 2 things I got to fix in the morning, but I'm going to be heading to the DK Sportsbook before that, getting that out of the way. Make sure you get everything situated. You do not want to be getting pulled away from this one. If you're in the FTN community, you can count on a high level of tilt in the FTN Discord and plenty of overall wholesome fun for all. Thanks on your way out. If you haven't done so already, please hit that like button. Continue to support the Super Show. We'll be back Sunday night, 9 p.m. PST, to go over the national championship game from a showdown perspective. You won't want to miss that. It is the final slate breakdown show of the season. Now, I'll still be coming to you live, or there's going to be some recordings every Wednesday night for the entire summer of the offseason. We're going to be talking about the transfer portal. We're going to be talking about coaching stuff, changes. There will be interviews. There's going to be a lot of good stuff. So if you love college basketball beyond just DFS and betting purposes, please keep it locked to the FTN Network. There's going to be a ton of coverage still from myself and the CBB Super Show. About midsummer, we will flip the switch and start covering spring practice results, summer camps, and all of that stuff as we gear up for another college football season as well. Lots of good stuff. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out with me. Good luck. Let's get those green screens. Let's be like Randall and walk it to the window, and overall have fun, make money. Let's do this.